Good morning. I'm going to start lesson 10.5 part 1 on completing the square. This lesson will be slightly longer, not because the lesson itself will be that much longer, but because I'm going to offer you a lot of optional extra problems that you can do and then see if you've worked out correctly so that you can have some confidence you're doing the homework right. So this is solve the quadratic equations by completing the square. And you'll understand what I mean by the square in a minute. We're going to go back to something we've done before, which is perfect square trinomials. And I'll give you an example of that. X squared plus 4x plus 4. That's a perfect square trinomial because if you factor it, you'll end up with x plus 2 squared. It's a perfect square, right? And if you remember, this means that if you factored it, x plus 2, so you have a single answer, which is the vertex of the parabola, right? So this perfect square trinomial is, if you remember, the a value right here would be 1 in front of the x squared. The b value in front of the x is going to be 4, and the c value here, which is just the numeral, is c. I'm going to show you how you can connect b and c because that's the key to this whole chapter. So here, taking the number 4, so b equals 4, if I take that, I divide 4 by 2, and I square it, I get 4. Well, 4 is actually the value for c. So I can take my b value and give me a c value. Now that doesn't seem that interesting until you realize that you can use this as a tool to solve any quadratic equation. Let me give you another example of how that works. X squared plus 6x plus 9, right? We already know from having done this before, if I factor this, 3 times 3 times 9 is 9, 3 plus 3 is 6. This is going to give me 3 plus x plus 3 squared. I'm not using it to solve, I'm using it just to show you the relationship between this number b and this number c. If I take this number, 6, I divide by 2, and I square it, I get 9, right? So my b is 6, right? I have b equals 6. I'm going to take 6, divide by 2 square, I get 9, which is c. This is really, really important because it relates to what you're going to see if you look at page 663 of your book. You're going to see x squared plus bx plus b over 2 squared. Okay? And again, all that they're showing you is that you're going to take b, like I just showed you here. You're going to divide it by 2 and square it, and that will give you c. So just that's the first part. And we're going to practice just that piece in a minute. Okay? In fact, before I go any further, let's just practice that piece to make it easy. So example 1 is going to throw out something you've not seen before. X plus 5x plus, and they're going to tell you we need to find what this number is that would make it a perfect square. Okay, let me just title this so you know what I'm doing. This is example 1. What number here is going to make this into a perfect square trinomial? Well, if I take my 5, I'm going to take my v value, b equals 5, and I'm going to do exactly what I did here. I'm going to say 5 divided by 2 and I'm going to square it. 5 divided by 2 squared. Well, 5 squared is 25, and 2 squared is 4. So 25/4 is going to be my C value. Okay, so the first problems in your homework, which I believe I have as 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 7 to 12, I can't remember which. That's the first part of what you have to find, okay? So these are just like the problems in your homework, that first batch. So that's the first part of what you have to find. The second part is they want you to see that this is equal to x plus b/2 squared. And what that means is simply, if I go back to my examples here, this is b/2 squared, right? That's b/2. This is b/2. 4/2 is 2. 6/2 is 3. Okay? So this is 4/2, and this is 6/2. Okay? So b/2 is going to be over here, which means that if I write this out all together, I have x squared plus bx plus b/2 squared equals x plus b/2 squared. And this is just like this, right? Or this. It's really the same thing, okay? Now, in your homework, they're going to ask you to do 2 things. 1 is to find what the C value is, and 2 is to give what it's going to be equal to if it's a perfect square trinomial. Well, if this is 5/2 squared, that means this is going to be equal to x plus 5/2 squared. And that's how you complete this problem. It's bothering me that this isn't quite as even looking. Okay? So that is my introduction. So let me just take a second and do another of these problems with you. Probably one of the guided practices, so that we get good at it. Let's look at guided practice number 1. They are asking you, find the value of C that makes the expression a perfect square trinomial. So the first they're saying, they're asking you, find C. Actually, let me rewrite that. Hold on a second, I wrote it too high and it's not appearing. So let's look at guided practice 1. X squared plus 8x plus C. Your first question is find C. And the second one is write the square of the binomial. Find the square of the binomial, or write it. Okay, and this is an exact pattern for 7 through 12 or whatever it is in the homework, okay, for those problems. All right, my first part is to find, right, C. Well, I know my B equals 8, right, because this is A. This is, let me do it on the bottom, A. This is B, and that's going to be C. Well, I know B is 8, right? So I'm going to do B/2. Well, B/2 is 4, but I know C equals B/2 squared, right? So B/2, again, is 8/2, and squared, 4 squared is 16. So I know that my C is 16. So I can rewrite my equation over here, x squared plus 8x plus 16. And we've answered the first part. We've answered already C equals 16. My second part says the square of the binomial, which means what is this equal to squared? What goes in here? Well, x plus, now let's look at this. What goes in here is b over 2, right? We know from what we did in the last slide that b over 2 goes in there. Well, b over 2 is up there. So we're going to put in x plus 4 squared. And that is the second answer that they're looking for, which is x plus 4 squared. So in your homework, again, this is numbers 7 through 12. I'm going to guess it could be 7 through 11. This is how you do them, okay? Follow these steps and you'll find C and you'll find the square of the binomial. I'm going to pause here before I go on to the next problem. Otherwise, my YouTube video is not going to load. See you in a sec.